4 women. Although he is resigning, the New York Attorney General is denying any wrongdoing, issuing the statement last night, saying, quote, "In the privacy of intimate relationships, I have engaged in role-playing and other consensual sexual activity. I have not assaulted anyone. I have never engaged in non-consensual sex, which is a line I would not cross."
With that, Laura Ingle picks up the story live in our newsroom here in New York City. Laura, what a shock this was, and good morning to you.
Indeed. Good morning, guys. This is a very fast-moving story, and as the details of New York Attorney General's alleged misdeeds are revealed, an investigation into the claims has been launched. We have just received confirmation that Manhattan District Attorney Cy Vance has opened an investigation into the allegations concerning Mr. Schneiderman. In the explosive article that was published by the New Yorker last night, 2 women, Michelle Manning, Barish, and Tanya Selvaratnam, say they had to receive medical attention after they alleged Schneiderman slapped, choked, and abused them while they were in a romantic relationship. Now, neither of them filed any police complaints. We checked in with the NYPD on that, but both say they did confide in friends about what they call assault and say they were too frightened to come forward because of Schneiderman's position. After last night's stories broke, Schneiderman lost the support of Democratic leaders, including Governor Andrew Cuomo, and Schneiderman agreed to step down, as you mentioned, saying the allegations would be too much of a distraction for him to continue. Schneiderman has been an outspoken figure in the Me Too movement against sexual harassment and raised his profile by taking on President Trump, pushing to change state law so he could prosecute the president's aides and filing lawsuits aimed at the Trump organization in New York. President Trump's son, Donald Jr., dredged up an October 2017 tweet from Schneiderman in which he had said no one is above the law. Donald Trump Jr. tweeting, "You were saying?" Legal experts say his resignation now makes the status of that effort far less certain.
Wow, what happens next in this, Laura?
Now, well, Schneiderman's interim replacement will be chosen by the state legislature, with voters deciding on a new attorney general in November. A newly announced Republican conservative candidate for New York Attorney General, Manhattan attorney Manny Alcerano, is asking the question, who else knew about the allegations that led to Schneiderman's downfall, saying there must have been enablers kept quiet about allegations. Schneiderman says he will resign at the close of business Tuesday. We have reporters and producers all over New York tracking people down to get comment on this, lawmakers, and we will let you know as it unfolds today.
A stunner it is. Thank you, Laura. We'll get reaction from the White House and a lot more coming up, too, to analyze this. Thank you, Laura Ingle, here in our newsroom, leading our coverage today on that. Julie.
And it's only Tuesday. Meanwhile, just hours away from Decision Day at the White House, with the deadline for President Trump to make a decision on the Iran nuclear deal just days away, the president will be making an announcement later this afternoon on whether the U.S. will stay or go in backing out of that deal. We're going to wait for word from the president on that, but John Roberts is live from the North Lawn to tell us how it's all going. Hi, John.
Julie, good morning to you. No head tilt one way or the other on what the president will announce this afternoon at 2 p.m. People around here are very tight-lipped today. This is clearly close hold, but indications are that the president will make some sort of move to pull out of the JCPOA, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, and will not re-sign a waiver of sanctions that he and President Obama have had to sign every 90 days under the agreement. That could begin the process of the U.S. finally withdrawing from the Iran nuclear deal. Difference of opinion in this administration over what to do. The president, John Bolton, his national security advisor, the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, all thinking that the U.S. should get out. Jim Mattis, the Secretary of Defense, thinks that the president should stay in. The president's also heard from our European allies, Emmanuel Macron there, seated beside the president, as well as German Chancellor Angela Merkel and UK Prime Minister Theresa May, urging him to stay in. Iran has threatened to restart its nuclear program if the U.S. pulls out. In that meeting with Macron last month, the president warned Iran against doing that. The president taking aim this morning at the former Secretary of State John Kerry after reports that he has been engaging in below-the-radar contacts with Iranian and European leaders. Here's what Kerry had to say in a public speech in Italy earlier this morning.
Today, as we sit here, before the president makes his decision, Iran is living by the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency. The agency says they're living up to it, and we have the inspectors to know it. Why on earth would you voluntarily, by choice, decide we're going to pull out?
Well, President Trump not taking too kindly to that, saying that Kerry needs to get off the stage. In a tweet this morning, John Kerry can't get over the fact that he had his chance and blew it. Stay away from negotiations, John. You are hurting your country. The president with one eye on Iran this morning, also another eye on China and North Korea in the past half hour, speaking with Chinese President Xi Jinping. Ahead of that phone call, the president tweeting, I will be speaking to my friend President Xi of China this morning at 8:30. The primary topics will be trade, where good things will happen, and North Korea, where relationships and trust are building. Yesterday, Xi Jinping met with Kim Jong-un of North Korea in the Chinese coastal city of Dalian. Kim Jong-un actually got on a plane and flew there. That's very unusual. The president getting set to announce the time and place of a meeting with Kim Jong-un. So as we kick off Tuesday, a lot to talk about here, Julie.
It is incredible every day. All right, John, thank you very much.
Size it all up now with Chris Starrett, our Fox News politics editor. How you doing, sir? Good day to you. Buried in all this news is the primary day in Trump country, right? Indiana, Ohio, West Virginia. What do you think tonight tells us, Chris?
Well, it tells us, it tells us this. Already we know that these primaries have been unnecessarily vicious, that these Republicans, sensing opportunity, have been at each other's throat in a totally counterproductive fashion for their party. You have in Indiana and West Virginia, two vulnerable red state Democrats. Probably Donnelly in Indiana is the most vulnerable red state Democrat in the entire country. And that opportunity has drawn a lot of sharks into the sea, but instead of going after the prey, they're going after each other. And Indiana has been a heinous primary, an embarrassingly bad primary for the Republicans, as they have ripped each other to shreds. In West Virginia, they have been at each other's throats, spending a lot of money and doing reputational harm to each other, so that when they get to the general election to face an entrenched, well-liked Democrat, they're going to hear these same charges repeated back to them.
Yeah, all the nice people in Indiana hearing all that bad talk. Don Blankenship had the quote of the primary. I think he said, I am Trumpier than Trump. We will see how he does in West Virginia. I want to hit on two more topics quickly. What is your guess with the Iran deal on the line as to what the commander-in-chief decides today, Chris?
Well, I would say this. The president has some options that are betwixt and between, right? He doesn't have to go for we're all out or we're all in. He can kick it to Congress. He can delay. He can do sort of what we've seen with NATO and then what we saw with NAFTA, which is we're going to roll it. We're going to see what happens. We're going to try to make a better deal. We're going to look for some nudges here and there. I would expect that is, or my expectation anyway, is that what the president is going to want to do is look for some more wiggle room on this, not to make a hardline choice one way or the other.
Meaning you give the European leaders another month, maybe?
A little something to work with. Trump has to walk away from this for his base because they said so much bad about this while he was running for president. He's got to walk away with his base to say, look, we're being tough on Iran. We're taking a hard line here. But also he wants Mattis and others and his European allies to know, look, we're cool. We're not going to blow this up for no reason.
Very interesting. It's going to be a big deal at 2 o'clock. On the Schneiderman story that broke last night, this town erupted.
Yeah.
How are you able to read this resignation? Does it have any effect on all the stories that we've been covering out of the Southern District of New York? I mean, could this have a follow-on effect on the Michael Cohen matter or any of the legal aspects that has this administration caught up?
It would be unfair and uncharitable of me to say that Schneiderman was a joke. But this is a guy who played big politics and had big aspirations in New York. The people in the Southern District of New York, U.S. Attorney's Office, are serious-minded. They're professionals. They're those people. Schneiderman was a showboat and obviously, as it turns out, a goofball, a weirdo. And so for him at this point, what many people in New York already thought about him was that the reason he was going after, he used to be friends with the Trumps, now he's going after the Trumps. He was a political opportunist, and he sort of, what goes around comes around.
Yeah. I think Icarus had wings of wax. I do believe so. Nice to see you, Chris Starrett. They're live and in person. Thank you very much. Donald Trump Jr. and Kellyanne Conway had some very interesting tweets when this thing went down last night, throughout the night last night. So if you're on Twitter, check them out. I mean, there's no love lost between this administration and Schneiderman here in New York.
Oh, no, there is not.
Yeah.
All right. Well, meanwhile, the White House launching a full-out defense of the president's pick to lead the CIA.
her commitment to the agency is one of the reasons that she is the right person to lead it. She wants to do everything she can to make sure the integrity of the CIA remains intact, isn't unnecessarily attacked.
In the midst of all this breaking news on North Korea and Iran, Democrats are trying to stonewall yet another confirmation hearing. Former Congressman Jason Chaffetz will be here to react.
Looking forward to hearing his reaction. Also, President Trump sending his endorsements for today's critical West Virginia Senate primary. His message is anyone but Don Blankenship. What is that all about? Congressman Evan Jenkins, he wants to win today. He's here live to make his case. Come on.
Sure is. And a slow-rolling disaster in Paradise, Hawaii's most active volcano, carving out a path of destruction. We are live on the ground.
We are feeling sorry for the people who have lost their houses because we know some of our neighbors have lost theirs. So at least up to now, we are okay.
We've had a great conversation. We've talked about an awful lot of things that helped clarify for me, and it was very helpful, and I just appreciate her so much.
What we have here is a cover-up from A to Z. If the American people could see what I've seen, I believe they would be calling their senator and urging their senator to vote against the nominee.
This is going to be a fascinating hearing. Various reactions on Gina Haspel, President Trump's pick to lead the CIA. Her confirmation hearing hits right about this time tomorrow. The CIA chief nominee, she's been under fire, partisan pressure in recent weeks. Reports she offered to pull her resignation over the weekend. That, though, was rescinded. Jason Chaffetz, former Utah congressman, Fox News contributor. How you doing, Jason? And good morning to you.
Good to see you.
You know her. We've barely heard her speak. What do we need to understand about her and your interactions?
I did interact with her a little bit. I don't know her well, but look, this is not a political person. She's not a politico who's up there, beating the bushes to on her political side. This would be the first time in nearly 50 years that somebody would become the FBI, to become the CIA director, who's been from the rank and file. And I'm sure the administration, I'm sure they could go find another white male, but the best qualified person happens to be a woman, and she's the most qualified person in the room, and they should empower her. If you're about women's empowerment, they should vote for Gina Haspel. She's the
What's
best
interesting,
person to do the job.
Leon Panetta supports her. Michael Hayden supports her. They've been on various sides of this Trump debate over the last year. John Brennan supports her. James Clapper supports her. Well, how are we to understand those endorsements?
Well, look, you have people on both sides of the aisle, people that have worked in Republican administrations and Democratic administrations, and they're singing her praises because she's done the work over the decades of her service. She has been by the side of Mike Pompeo for the last 15 months or so. So you have somebody who's ready to go right out of the chutes. She's served in Africa. She's served in Europe. She's done some of the most difficult things. I know she had some bumps in the road, and I'm sure she'll talk about that. But when you look at somebody behind the scenes, you have this wide array of people with a lot of political different affiliations all singing her praises.
Yeah, here's the president, too. On Twitter, he says, Gina Haspel, my highly respected nominee to lead the CIA, is being praised for the fact that she has been and always will be tough on terror. This is a woman who's been a leader wherever she has gone. The CIA wants her to lead them in America's bright and glorious future. I mean, certainly his endorsement given there. Do you have concerns about, in a public hearing, being asked these critical questions about black sites in the days after 9/11, interrogations that happened at that time?
I just believe in transparency. I really am I really do believe that we're different from the rest of the world and that we ask these tough questions. We look under the hood. You got to be careful. There's some answers she would have to give behind closed doors, and the senators know that. And if they play that silly game, shame on them. But I think that's what we do in this country. We talk it through. What did she learn? What is her perspective? I think that's a legitimate question.
Maybe her answer is that we did not know what was going on in the world, and we had to figure this out. I would, in all likelihood, that's where those answers are going to be. Last question. You're writing a book about the deep state in Washington, D.C. She's been there since 1985.
Well, look, because she has a lot of experience doesn't mean she's the wrong person. In fact, I would argue if it's not Gina Haspel, then who do they have? You want to have somebody who's actually been in those fights, who's been in those discussions, who's seen the good and the bad and the ugly, and I think that's what makes her eminently qualified. But the deep state, yeah, when they work to try to fight to protect their own and just embarrass this administration for the sake of embarrassing it, yeah, I am writing a book about it, and I think it'll be pretty interesting.
You know some things that we don't. Looking forward to that. Sir, thank you for your time today. Again, the hearing is live tomorrow here on America's News. And Jason Chaffetz, thank you.
Thank you.
Breaking news on the case of an American pastor being held in a Turkish prison. Pastor Andrew Brunson remains behind bars at this hour ahead of his next hearing. Senator Tom Tillis is fighting for the pastor's release. He will join us right after the break. The American pastor on trial in Turkey for alleged ties to terrorist groups has been sent back to prison. A judge ordered Pastor Andrew Brunson to remain behind bars and set his next hearing for mid-July. Turkish reports say, meantime, an anonymous witness claimed the pastor helped Kurdish militants and he aimed to create a Christian Kurdish state. Brunson rejected the claim, saying in a statement, in part, these accusations are shameful and disgusting. Our doors were open to everyone. I strive to prevent politics entering the church. Our next guest went to Turkey to visit Pastor Brunson and has been fighting to bring him back. North Carolina Senator Tom Tillis joins us now. Senator, thank you very much for talking to us this morning.
Thank you.
Yesterday, the secret witness I want to talk to you about comes out and makes these preposterous claims. I mean, he claimed that he helped Kurdish militants. He aimed to create a Christian Kurdish state. These claims and this witness comes out of the 11th hour. I mean, what do you make of this witness, first of all?
Well, I saw a lot of that. I was in a Turkish courtroom for a better part of 12 hours about a month ago, and I'd visited Pastor Brunson about 3 weeks earlier in prison and spoke with him directly. The allegations are absurd. There are secret witnesses that we saw testimony in one case where the allegation that was rising to a level, putting this man in prison for 35 years, they saw a light in a room upstairs in the church for 4 hours, and there had to be something bad happening there. The odd thing about that particular circumstance by a secret witness is there's no window in this room. I've been to the church. I've heard the allegations about secret meetings. The testimony of these secret witnesses is absurd, and then even more absurd, Pastor Brunson requested 10 people to come before him as witnesses in his defense, and they've all been denied because they say that they're suspects. They haven't been charged with anything. They haven't been convicted of anything, but they say they're suspects and therefore not qualified to testify on his behalf. That's the nature of this kangaroo court that we're witnessing in Turkey.
Yeah, it's really despicable. I mean, Brunson faces serious espionage charges. He should be allowed to defend himself. I mean, he's being accused of spying and terror-related charges even, and clearly he's never going to be given a fair shot to defend himself in court. And you just mentioned, so here's what happened. They send him back to his prison cell after this secret, or you should call it a surprise witness comes out, totally catches his team off guard. The vice chair of the U.S. Commission of International Religious Freedom said this, that the judge's decision at the conclusion of today's hearing to dismiss all of the witnesses called by Pastor Brunson's defense without listening to a single minute of their testimony is simply unconscionable. What is the game plan before his next hearing on July 18th?
Well, we're going to continue to up the pressure. Turkey is a NATO ally. We've got an Air Force base there. We have a very tight relationship with them in terms of manufacturing of the Joint Strike Fighter. We've got to rethink our relationship with Turkey if this is how they're going to treat American citizens as a NATO ally. It's unheard of among NATO allies to treat people this way. For anybody to say they have to let the judicial process play out in Turkey doesn't understand the Turkish judiciary. It's a political process that President Erdogan is allowing to play out, and I don't understand what their end game is. Our end game is to continue to increase the pressure on Turkey and free Pastor Brunson, who's been in prison now for about 578 days, and the vast majority of that was without charges. We need to bring him home, and we also need to be mindful of other Americans who've either been sentenced, we have a NASA scientist sentenced to 7.5 years, and other people who worked with our State Department who are awaiting trial. This has to stop. Otherwise, we have to rethink our relationship with Turkey.
So clearly something needs to happen before there's a sentencing. Once the sentencing happens, it's too late. You went to go visit Pastor Brunson. How's he doing? And what are you doing currently to bring him back? How is that going?
Well, I think he's doing extraordinarily well under the circumstances, but he's been in impossible conditions. For about 15 months, he was in a prison cell that had 21 people in it designed for 8. He's been moved to a different prison that, relatively speaking, is better. What we're going to do, we tried to show respect to the Turkish government. I tried to show respect by meeting with the ambassador and the foreign minister. But now what we have to do is show that we're prepared to act in terms of sanctions, in terms of changing the nature of our relationship with Turkey, and we have to look at all of our ties with Turkey and question whether or not that's the best partner to partner with on certain things around national defense and economic ties.
We just want to thank you for, the work that you're doing, first of all. I mean, to have an ally like you, to be trapped in a prison in a country such as Turkey or North Korea as an American and have nobody out here defending you is probably the scariest thing you could possibly face. Is the White House getting involved at all?
They are. To the president's credit, he's made a specific call to President Erdogan, spoke about it. Secretary Pompeo had a discussion within probably a day of him coming on board after his confirmation. We are working hand in glove on this issue. Now, that's not to say that some of the things we're proposing will have universal support, because these are very important issues around the Joint Strike Fighter, around sanctions, around our presence at Incirlik. But they're all things that have to be examined through the lens of Turkey's behavior over the past couple of years since the coup.
All right, Senator Tom Tillis, great to have you in this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
And good luck to you. Candidate for the West Virginia Senate GOP primary, Don Blankenship, firing back at President Trump, who urged voters not to support him in today's primary. Listen.
He's been misinformed, and West Virginians know the truth. West Virginians now know, after whatever it's been, a 6-month campaign, they know more about what's important and the policies and UBV and everything than the president.
We're live in West Virginia as voters decide who will run against Democrat Joe Manchin in November. And our next guest hopes he'll get the chance. Congressman Evan Jenkins joins us just ahead.
9:33, Fox News Alert now. First multi-state primary day of the year goes down today, and voters head to the polls in 4 states. We're keeping a close eye on Indiana, Ohio, and West Virginia. We'll explain that coming up right now. So we are back on the billboard to give you a bit of an idea right now for what is moving on primary day today. These were the results from 2016. Red for President Trump and blue for Hillary Clinton based on the results today on May 8th. I mentioned North Carolina. But these 3 states, Indiana, Ohio, West Virginia, really the heart of Trump country. If you look at the results from 2016, he won West Virginia by 42 points. Over in Ohio, he won the state by 8 points, which is a much larger margin than we have seen in several decades for presidential elections in the Buckeye State. To the west in Indiana, he was a victor there as well, winning over Hillary Clinton, going against Mike Brown, the businessman. The winner will take on Joe Donnelly in November, and this is a seat and a state where Republicans feel as if they've got a pretty good chance for a pickup come November. Ohio's going to be a bigger battle. You got Jim Renacci, the congressman, Mike Gibbons, the businessman. They'll face off head-to-head today. The winner will then take off Sherrod Brown, who seems to be stabilizing his numbers over the past 12 months or so. Looks to be a bigger battle for Republicans in the Buckeye State. West Virginia, meanwhile, if you saw our primary debate about a week ago between Blankenship and Jenkins and Morrissey, there's not a lot of love lost apparently on the stage. However, all 3 men seem to mention Donald Trump's name in every answer they gave. The winner of this primary will likely take on Joe Manchin, a popular Democrat for the moment there in West Virginia. But again, Republicans think they got a shot at knocking Joe Manchin off. That is how we set the table. Now we have Team Fox coverage for one of the Republican candidates for the Senate nomination in West Virginia. Congressman Evan Jenkins makes his case in a moment here. But first, live to Peter Ducey, Charleston, West Virginia, where you've been for about a month now. Peter, good morning. What's the latest today?
And Bill, now in the final hours of this campaign, the former coal baron Don Blankenship is not running away from criticisms of his campaign. He's instead repeating them in a new radio ad.
They're calling me a bigot, a moron, a despicable character, and mentally ill. But even if all of this is true, I will do a better job than they have done.
The one thing Blankenship has tried to explain away is his misdemeanor conviction for conspiring to violate mine safety standards that earned him a year in prison following the Upper Big Branch mine disaster that killed 29 people. But Attorney General Patrick Morrisey is doing his best to make sure that voters here don't forget about Blankenship's association with the mine explosion. Morrisey held a press conference to announce he was contacting Blankenship's probation officer for breaking the rules about filing a financial disclosure, and now Morrisey has a new ad himself.
A convicted criminal or a proven conservative? That's your choice.
Congressman Evan Jenkins, who was first place in the Fox News poll that came out 2 weeks ago today and remains the only statewide public poll, already voted this morning, and he, along with Morrisey, share President Trump's blessing in this race.
We have just worked so hard and had so many people helping every step of the way. That's the great thing about elections, is that the voters get their opportunity to express their opinion, their vote on Election Day. So I'm encouraged. I feel great today.
Democratic super PACs have poured money into this state to try to stop Jenkins or Morrisey from winning today's primary, while Republican super PACs have pumped money in to try to stop the Republican Don Blankenship. They do not think that he can beat Joe Manchin in November.
Oh, thank you, Peter. We'll see you later tonight. Peter Ducey there live in Charleston. Back upstairs to Julie now with more.
Very exciting stuff. Let's bring in West Virginia Congressman Evan Jenkins, GOP candidate for nomination to the U.S. Senate. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. All right, wow, this is getting really exciting in West Virginia. The president urging voters, whatever they do, do not vote for Don Blankenship. How are voters reacting to the president's push?
Well, you know what? He went on a little further than that. He said, support Evan Jenkins. So we are honored to have the president's support endorsement yesterday. We feel so much energy in our campaign. Yes, my opponents seem to be spending their last days of this campaign bickering at one another. We've got an optimistic look about the future. We've got a strong relationship with President Trump. We are working each and every day. We've got a brighter future in West Virginia. We're going to win today on Election Day.
All right. Well, we wish you good luck. The president's urging against Blankenship obviously helps both you, but there's also another contender in this race, Attorney General Patrick Morrisey. You're both Republican rivals in a state the president handily won in 2016. So, if you will, compare yourself to Morrisey.
Well, there's a huge difference. Patrick Morrisey, and sorry to spend this last day talking about my opponent, but you asked. He was 18 years as a Hill lobbyist, big pharma, made millions and millions. We've got a drug crisis in West Virginia. We don't need a D.C. lobbyist that made millions of dollars peddling pills in our state. He also ran for Congress in New Jersey on his Jersey values. But this is about the future of West Virginia. My West Virginia roots, raised my family here. It's an optimistic outlook, working with President Trump and having the president weigh in yesterday saying that he supported a vote for Evan Jenkins today means the world. And we're going to win today. We're a brighter future. We're proud West Virginians standing up for what we believe in.
All right. Well, I hate to have you talk about your opponent, but hey, that's how you sell yourself. Sometimes you got to talk about your opponent. All right. So let's talk about jobs and coal mining. These are obviously two issues of great interest in West Virginia. How does your opponent differ on those issues?
Well, look, I was the one who was standing in the White House with President Trump. President Trump signing the legislation I passed in Congress that saved 1/3 of all the coal mining jobs in America. I'm the one working with President Trump that actually passed the tax cut bill that is putting more money in people's pockets. So the big distinction between me and the other folks are that I'm actually working with President Trump. The economy is improving. In fact, last year, West Virginia's economic growth rate activity was the 10th fastest in the country. What a difference an election makes. What a difference having somebody that's already working with President Trump and President Trump supporting my candidacy for the U.S. Senate. President Trump needs a trusted supporter. We can, we will, and we're the only one that can replace Joe Manchin this fall.
Yeah, you know, I'd like to say nothing surprises me anymore, but sometimes I get a little surprised. I want to get back to Blankenship for just a second, because this former coal executive, as he is, he was convicted of, if many people at home don't actually already know this, conspiring of violating mine safety rules after a 2010 explosion. 29 people were killed. How does Blankenship even have a fighting chance?
Well, you know what? He's run a really kind of odd campaign. He's independently wealthy. He's opened up his own checkbook. But West Virginians know about the horrific disaster where 29 brave West Virginia souls were lost in the UBB mine disaster. You know, my great-great-granddad was Fire Boss Jenkins, coal miner. He died in a coal mine explosion. We're West Virginians. We're prideful. We fight for what we believe in. And that's why my candidacy offers the kind of hope and opportunity and the core West Virginia values that we recognize and need in West Virginia.
All right, Congressman Evan Jenkins, good luck to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for letting me be with you this morning.
Sure thing, Phil.
It's like magic. Here we are. You learn anything down there?
I sure did. How did you get up here so fast?
You know, we fly. Brand new reaction in from Tehran today. We're expecting a decision on the president, on the nuclear deal. White House Director of Legislative Affairs, Mark Short, is going to talk about that and a lot more live from the North Lawn coming up in a moment.
Yeah, plus the Trump administration no longer playing games when it comes to illegal immigration. Why the Attorney General is now unveiling his zero tolerance policy.
If you cross the border unlawfully, then we will prosecute you. It's that simple. If you smuggle illegal aliens across our border, then we will prosecute you. If you are smuggling a child, then we will prosecute you.
Watch the clock now, awaiting the president's big decision on the Iran nuke deal today, 2 o'clock East Coast time. I'm now joined by the White House Director of Legislative Affairs, Mark Short. Sir, how are you? And
Bill,
good morning. Thanks for being here today. A couple really important topics here. Give us a hint, give us a clue as to what's happening inside the West Wing on the Iran decision.
Well, Bill, you only have a few more hours to wait on that one. I can't really get ahead of the president. But I think the president's been clear on his opinion about the Iran deal ever since the campaign. When you send $1.8 billion in cash to the mullahs in Iran, who use that cash in some cases to fund terrorism across the Middle East, continue to fund rebels in Yemen that are continuing to fight against our allies, continuing to actually, in funding terrorists, murder innocent Americans and Westerners, it's kind of hard to think that Iran is following the spirit of the deal. And so I think the president has been clear about his demands for a better deal, and I think that he will make his case to the American people today.
And we await that. I think he called it the worst deal ever. I think he's probably said that 1,000 times.
Yeah.
Does the White House, does this president not believe that Tehran has held up its end of the bargain?
I think, Bill, one of the concerns, in fact, is that there's been limitations on the ability to actually do inspection visits into Iran onto the nuclear sites. But I think, again, if they were abiding by the spirit of the deal, they wouldn't be fomenting unrest, targeting innocent civilians, funding terrorism across the Middle East, continuing to send intercontinental ballistic missiles to rebels that are fighting against our allies. So, yeah, I think that it's hard to suggest they've actually followed the spirit of the deal.
I guess one of the big questions is if you get out and you put the sanctions back in place, you know, what happens after that? I think that's a big part of where the debate is. So let's see, given the fallout. Now, the president tweeted this about John Kerry. There are a lot of questions about what he's been up to over the past couple of months. John Kerry can't get over the fact that he had his chance and blew it, says the president. Stay away from negotiations, John. You are hurting your country. John Kerry was speaking a bit earlier today on another network, and his spokesperson put out this statement. Secretary Kerry stays in touch with former counterparts around the world, just like every previous Secretary of State, like America's closest allies. He believes it's important that the nuclear agreement, which took the world years to negotiate, remain effective as countries focus on stability in the region, end quote. Well, what do you think of John Kerry's back channel, if that's the word you want to use?
Bill, I think that John Kerry's tenure as Secretary of State proved to be disastrous for peace across the globe. I think you'll recall that John Kerry told the American people that 100% of the chemical weapons in Syria had been removed. Obviously, we've learned that that was not the case. So I think we need to move on from his tenure. We're excited that Mike Pompeo is Secretary of State today, and we know he's going to do a terrific job for the American people.
We are looking forward to her hearing tomorrow. I think the American people really want to see and hear what Mary Haspel has to say, who could be the next person to lead the CIA. What do we need to understand about her?
I think there are a couple of things, Bill. Gina has devoted her entire life to serving our country. In fact, when she graduated from high school, she wanted to go to West Point, but her dad, who was a career Air Force officer, explained to her they didn't take women at that point. So she instead graduated with honors from the University of Louisville and entered into the CIA, where she's had a magnificent career for 33 years, risen all the way up to the top ranks, served in some of the most dangerous places across the globe in 4 different occasions as station chief. There's nobody that we could find who would be better qualified for this role. The last time that America had somebody who had served as a career agent lead the CIA was 52 years ago. She not only would be the first female director of the CIA, but actually the first career servant in 52 years to lead the agency. She's a phenomenal
I'm anxious
pick.
to see how these senators treat her and respond to Gina Haspel tomorrow when that hearing goes live, during this hour, in fact. News in New York. Eric Schneiderman is out, the AG in New York. On September 11, 2013, this was the tweet from the president, then candidate, then private citizen, I should say. Weiner is gone, Spitzer's gone. Next will be lightweight AG Eric Schneiderman. Is he a crook? Wait and see, worse than Spitzer or Weiner. That was from September of 2013. What's the White House reaction to the headline from overnight?
It's a sad chapter, Bill. I don't think anybody can gleefully look back and say that they were right about forecasting what would happen.
Toxic gas. We're live on the ground next.